Well, my husband and I had been waiting for almost 2 months to cross from near Fort Lauderdale to the Bahamas, and the weather was never right. Finally, the weather looked perfect. My husband called the yacht club, anyone he could think of for advice. And they said, it's a perfect day. So we had to leave the harbor at night because when you're sailing out into the open water, you have to make sure you have enough time to get to the other side with no matter what the difficulties before nightfall. So this was a 50-mile run. So we left the harbor at a little before midnight because a little earlier because we had to be able to see where we were going. That's the problem with night sailing. So we had asked a young man that we met, a guy who had a cigarette boat and took people out on cruises or something, or go fishing, and we asked him if he'd go along with us because I was afraid to cross without somebody with us that knew how to run the boat, how to sail and everything. So we asked this young man, he said sure, he'd do it. He has a friend who comes over and picks him up in the Bahamas anytime he wants to take a run like this. So at the appointed time, Bill showed up, but he wasn't alone. He had his girlfriend with him and a malted milk shaker, and we didn't want, we were just desperate because we'd been waiting so long, so we thought, all right, well, that's only going to take 8 hours to cross probably, we can stand that. So they, in their malted milk shakers, got aboard and parked their belongings up in the forward cabin and came out, and my husband asked the guy if he'd like to be skipper, so he did. He sat behind the wheel, and for a short time, and then a storm came up. And so the wind was terrible, rain, howling, wind and rain, and so my husband asked the guy to get out from behind the wheel. He had to put it on automatic pilot. And the guy we found out, was drunk, and he had passed out behind the wheel, holding onto the wheel that we needed to steer us, run the boat. So we had to drag him out from there, get the boat on autopilot, and it turned out that the malted milkshaker that they each had stingers in them.
So what's a malted milkshaker?
A metal shaker, like what you make shakes.
Oh, it's just like what it sounds like. Okay.
Yeah,
And but there was full of stingers.
Yeah.
Which is brandy and cream de menthe, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Oh,
So
it's a liquor.
The guy had passed out.
From drinking stingers.
And I don't know where the girlfriend was. I don't remember seeing much of her on the passage.
Probably throwing up.
But so for 12 hours, we sailed east, or actually we were under motor. We motored east towards Bimini, and then after a couple of hours, we couldn't ever take a chance on running aground over in Bimini, so we had to go turn around and head back towards Florida. So the rain got worse and worse, and the storm got worse and worse. I was seasick. The two people were down below someplace in their cabin, I guess, and my husband was at the wheel, just trying to get us to Bimini. So at noon the next day, the sun came out. And my husband had his chart with him, said, now we go south of Bimini and go around to Allenstown where the harbor is. And the guy said, no, I always go the north end. And my husband said, well, the chart, he said, I'm telling you, I do it all the time. Well, of course, no one took into consideration that he had a cigarette boat that has no keel. And we have a 6-foot keel. So anyway, finally, my husband was just completely worn out after 12 hours of handling this sail. We had traffic from overseas, big freighters coming at us, and anything else that was afloat. So finally, my husband said, all right, I don't know how to, this is too much for me. I'm just going to go the way he says. He promises. So we started going towards the north end of Bimini and ran aground. And we're there for 2 days, aground. And the guy was in his girlfriend were down below in their cabin most of the time, and when you're in a sailboat with a big keel, when the tide goes out, your boat goes out in one direction, and when it's coming in, the boat goes straight up and down, and then heels over to the other direction. So most of the time, there's no flat floor to stand on. And so finally, after 2 days, the weather calmed down enough for someone to come out and tow the boat. But just before that, the water had calmed down some, so my husband asked the guy to go with him in their dinghy, and they'd walk the dinghy over to the town and get the people. Well, that's what they had to do to get help. And so they they got into the dinghy and loosened that and started leaving. And the man said, "I'm scared of crabs. I'm going to get in the dinghy." So he got in the boat. My husband had to pull him through the water for several miles. Anyway, they finally got to the.
He was scared of crabs, and so what do you mean he had to get in the dinghy?
He didn't want to be walking on the
No.
ocean floor.
And your husband dragged him.
Yeah. So anyway, after the 2 days, the freighter came and the towboat came and got us off the sandbar, and started taking the boat in. So my husband and I got a ride with them into town, and the most amazing thing of the story to me was after that experience, I mean, it really was hair-raising. We just went to the bar and had a drink and laughed about it. So, luckily, we were both able to do that about a lot of things in life. And so the guy called his friend, and the guy flew over and picked him and his girlfriend off. And we never saw them again, luckily. I'm assuming they never talked about it to anybody.
For them, it was a secret because it was embarrassing.
Exactly. But anyway, it was quite an experience.